Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Oh, this is a good one.
It really is. It's all about how our minds work, right? And, all those fascinating mental processes behind our decisions.
Yeah, it's packed with insights.
It is, and they can really help us understand ourselves better, maybe even make better decisions.
Absolutely. One of the core concepts is this idea of two systems of thinking. We've got system one,
Yeah.
which is fast, intuitive, automatic. And then there's system two,
A slower one.
slower, more deliberate and analytical.
So it's like we have two different minds working at the same time.
In a way, yeah. Think of it as a dynamic duo, each with its own strengths and
Uh-huh.
weaknesses.
Okay, so how does this play out in our everyday lives? Can you give us an example?
Sure, imagine you're driving a car.
Okay.
Most of the time, it's
Yeah.
system one at the wheel,
Got it.
handling all those routine tasks like steering and braking.
Effortlessly.
Exactly. But then you hit a tricky situation,
Oh,
like merging onto a busy highway.
yeah,
That's when system two kicks in to help you navigate the complexity.
makes sense. So system one keeps things running smoothly, and system two is there for when we need to really focus.
That's the idea. But of course, it's not always that harmonious between the two.
So they clash sometimes.
They do. Kahneman points out how system one, with its reliance on these mental shortcuts,
Heuristics?
yes, heuristics, they can lead us to predictable errors.
Interesting. Like what kind of errors?
Well, take the availability heuristic, for example.
Okay.
It causes us to overestimate the likelihood of events that easily come to mind.
Events like,
Plane crashes.
oh yeah,
Shark attacks, things like that. Things that are vivid and dramatic,
makes sense.
even if statistically they're quite rare.
So our minds latch on to the scary stories, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're not that common.
Exactly.
Does that mean we can't trust our intuition at all?
Not necessarily. Intuition can be very valuable, especially when we have a lot of experience. But Kahneman's point is that we need to be aware of that potential for bias
Got it.
and engage system two when it really matters.
For those big decisions.
Exactly.
So it's about finding the right balance.
Yeah,
Right. Trusting our gut, but also taking the time to think things through.
exactly.
But how do we know when to activate system two? Are there any warning signs?
That's a great question. One clue is when our emotions are running high.
Oh, okay.
Fear, anger, excitement, all these things can cloud our judgment.
So we're more vulnerable to those biases then.
Yes. And another red flag is when we're facing a situation that's complex or unfamiliar.
Something that really needs that careful analysis.
Exactly.
So if we feel pressured to make a quick decision,
Right.
or if the stakes are high,
It's a good time to pause
yeah,
and engage that system too.
that makes a lot of sense. This reminds me of something else Kahneman talks about, prospect theory,
Oh, yes.
and how we're so afraid of loss that it can really mess with our decision-making.
Absolutely. His research shows that we feel the pain of a loss so much more intensely than the pleasure of a gain.
Oh, I feel that, yeah.
Right. And this leads to loss aversion.
So we might miss out on opportunities because we're too scared of losing what we already have.
Exactly. Think about the stock market, for example. People hold on to those losing stocks.
Yeah, hoping for a rebound.
Right. Even when it might be wiser to cut their losses and move on.
Or even salary negotiations.
That's a good one.
People might accept a lower offer than they deserve.
Because they're afraid of losing the job offer altogether.
Loss aversion holding us back.
It can, but understanding it can be a powerful tool. Kahneman suggests reframing our thinking to focus on potential gains rather than losses.
It's about shifting our perspective, isn't it? From fear to opportunity. And, this leads us to another fascinating concept in the book, framing effects.
Oh, yes, framing is so powerful.
It really is. Kahneman shows how the way choices are presented, even if the options are the same,
Right.
can dramatically change our preferences.
He gives that classic example of a medical treatment, right?
Okay.
Presented in terms of survival rates
Yeah.
versus mortality rates.
Interesting.
People are more likely to choose the treatment with a 90% survival rate, even
Okay.
though it's the same as a 10% mortality rate.
Wow, just a subtle change in words can really influence us.
It's amazing how powerful framing can be.
It makes you wonder how much of our decision-making is actually rational.
Right. Versus being influenced by these unconscious biases.
That's a really good question. And, speaking of expanding our minds and thinking about things in new ways,
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to a fantastic YouTube channel called Affirmify Journey.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
They have some incredible videos on personal growth, motivation, achieving goals.
Sounds right up my alley.
It really is. And while we're on the topic of resources and expanding our knowledge, let's shift gears back to the book for a bit.
Sounds good.
I want to talk about Kahneman's work on the remembering self versus the experiencing self,
Ah, yes. This is where he gets into happiness and well-being.
and how complex it all is.
Exactly. He argues that we actually have two selves. One that experiences life in the moment,
Okay.
and another that remembers and evaluates those experiences later.
So we have a present self
Yeah,
and a storyteller self,
that's a great way to put it.
and sometimes they don't agree.
They don't always, no. The remembering self, it seems, tends to prioritize the peak moments and the end moments of an experience.
Even if those moments aren't really representative of the whole experience.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Imagine going on vacation.
Okay.
You spend weeks planning, you're so excited, you have a fantastic time for most of it.
Yeah.
But then the last day is a bit of a letdown.
Oh, no.
Now, the remembering self might focus on that negative ending
Right.
and remember the whole vacation less fondly.
Interesting. So it's not just about enjoying the present moment.
It's about crafting a narrative that our remembering self will be happy with.
Almost like we're creating a highlight reel.
In a way, yes.
So we need to think about both selves, right?
It seems so.
What will I remember about this? How will it shape my future self? Those are some big questions.
They are.
It's about being mindful of the stories we're creating for ourselves and for others.
And it makes you wonder if we can train ourselves to savor those good moments.
Yeah.
And let go of the not-so-perfect endings.
That's a really interesting thought. This leads us to another concept in the book, effective forecasting,
Ah, yes. Predicting future happiness.
and how bad we are at it.
We really are. We tend to overestimate the intensity and how long our emotions will last.
We think winning the lottery will make us happy forever,
Right.
or that a breakup will break us.
Exactly. But our emotions, they tend to reset to a baseline over time.
We're more resilient than we think.
It seems so.
Yeah.
We adapt, we find new sources of joy, and this makes you wonder if we spend too much time chasing fleeting highs.
Instead of building a solid foundation for well-being.
And
This has been so insightful so far, and we've only scratched the surface of thinking fast and slow.
there's so much more to explore.
There really is. It's a book packed with insights about how our minds work and how we make decisions.
It's a game changer, for sure.
I agree. And we'll dive into even more fascinating insights from thinking fast and slow in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm really enjoying this deep dive.
Me too. It's a fascinating book, isn't it?
It really is. We've already talked about so much like heuristics and loss aversion, but there's still so much to cover.
Right, like cognitive biases.
Yes. Let's talk about those some more. Are there any others that you find particularly interesting?
Well, the anchoring effect is a big one.
Anchoring, what's that?
It's where our judgments are swayed by an initial piece of information,
Even if it's not relevant.
even if it's completely irrelevant.
So we get fixated on that first number, even if it has nothing to do with what we're actually trying to figure out.
Exactly. Kahneman describes this study where people had to estimate the percentage of African countries in the UN.
Okay.
But first, they spun a wheel that landed on a random number.
A random number.
Yeah. And those who saw a higher number on the wheel, they tended to give higher estimates.
Wow. Even though the wheel spin had absolutely nothing to do with the actual answer.
It's a powerful demonstration of how easily our minds can be influenced.
So where else do we see this anchoring effect?
Oh, all the time. Negotiating prices,
Okay.
making investments. Imagine you're buying a used car,
Yeah.
and the seller starts with a really high asking price.
Right.
You're more likely to end up paying more, even if you negotiate them down, because that initial anchor sets the stage.
So how do we fight back against this anchoring effect?
Kahneman suggests a technique called thinking the opposite.
What does that mean?
It means actively considering counter-arguments, looking at it from different angles.
So instead of just accepting that first piece of information,
Right.
we should question it, challenge it.
Exactly. Engage that system too.
Get that analytical mind working.
Yes. Don't just jump to conclusions. You know, this makes me think about the bigger picture of Kahneman's work. It goes beyond just personal decision-making, doesn't it?
I was just thinking the same thing. I mean, it has implications for so many fields.
Economics, finance, healthcare, public policy.
It's fascinating how widely applicable his insights are.
Absolutely. Like the concept of nudges.
Oh yeah, tell me more about those.
It's about using subtle interventions to encourage people to make better choices.
Like for their own good.
Exactly. Think about organ donation.
Okay.
Some cities have changed the default option to opt out instead of opt in.
Interesting.
And it's led to a huge increase in organ donation rates.
Just by changing the default.
It's a powerful example of how framing can influence behavior.
But isn't there a bit of a slippery slope there? I mean, manipulating people's choices, even if it's for their benefit.
It's a valid concern. The ethics of nudging are definitely complex.
Yeah.
But we have to remember we're constantly being nudged in some way.
That's true.
Whether it's advertising, social norms.
Or even just the way our environment is designed.
Exactly. The question is whether those nudges align with our values.
So it's about being aware of those influences and making conscious choices.
Right. Choosing the nudges we want.
And speaking of choices, this reminds me of Kahneman's work on the remembering self and the experiencing self,
Oh, yes. The two selves.
and how we often make choices based on how we think we'll remember them.
More than how we actually experience them in the moment.
It's like we're trying to create the perfect memory, even if it's not entirely accurate.
Exactly. Think about planning a vacation. We might choose a destination based on those stunning pictures.
The Instagram-worthy moments.
Right. Even if those images only represent a tiny fraction of the overall experience.
We're drawn to those peak experiences, those highlights.
But they don't necessarily guarantee lasting happiness.
So how do we align our choices with what truly matters? What will truly make us happy?
Well, Kahneman suggests we focus on duration neglect.
Duration neglect.
It means considering the overall duration of an experience, not just the peak moments.
So instead of just planning that one amazing vacation,
Yeah,
we might be better off spreading our leisure time throughout the year.
exactly. More opportunities for enjoyment, for relaxation.
It's about enjoying the whole journey, not just chasing the highlights.
Precisely. And this ties into the importance of mindfulness, being present.
Appreciating the small things.
Exactly. You know, all of this brings us back to another key concept, effective forecasting,
Yes, predicting our future happiness.
and how often we get it wrong,
We think that big promotion will make us happy forever.
or that a rejection will crush us.
But our emotions tend to even out over time.
Right. We adapt, we find new sources of joy.
It's remarkable how resilient we can be.
It is. And it makes you wonder if we're putting too much emphasis on those fleeting highs and lows.
Instead of focusing on building a solid foundation for well-being.
That's a great insight. Maybe cultivating gratitude, mindfulness, strong relationships, those are the keys to lasting happiness.
It's about shifting our focus from chasing happiness to creating it.
Exactly. And that's where thinking fast and slow offers so much wisdom.
It's really been eye-opening.
It's like putting on a new pair of glasses and seeing the world in a whole new way.
I love that analogy. It's about understanding our minds, the forces that shape our perceptions.
Our beliefs, our decisions.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's so rewarding. It helps us make sense of this complex world.
Absolutely. And I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
Oh, there's so much more to uncover.
I can't wait to dive into the final part of our deep dive. Are you ready?
I'm ready when you are.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's amazing how much there is to unpack in thinking fast and slow, isn't it?
It really is. We've explored so much already, from the two systems of thinking to all those fascinating biases.
It's like peeking behind the curtain of our own mind.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I'm curious, what are some of the most practical takeaways you've gleaned from this book? You know, things we can actually apply in our daily lives.
You're right, there's a lot to ponder. One thing that really struck me is how important it is to slow down when making big decisions.
Oh, absolutely.
To really engage that system two thinking.
System one is great for everyday stuff, but for those complex or emotionally charged situations,
Yeah.
we need to hit the pause button.
It's about resisting that urge to jump to conclusions.
Resisting that quick judgment.
Engaging in that slower, more deliberate analysis.
Exactly. Another key takeaway, and we've talked about this a lot, is being aware of those biases.
Those sneaky biases, always lurking.
Kahneman's work shows that we're all susceptible to them.
It's humbling, isn't it, to realize that our minds aren't as perfectly rational as we might think.
It is. But recognizing that vulnerability is the first step to overcoming it.
So how do we become more aware of those biases? Are there any tricks?
Well, one thing is to pay attention to our emotions.
Oh.
When we're feeling stressed, anxious, excited.
Our emotions can hijack our thinking.
Exactly. That's when those impulsive, System 1-driven decisions tend to take over.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Yeah, seeking out diverse perspectives can be really helpful.
Talking to people who see things differently.
Right. Challenging our own assumptions, uncovering those blind spots we might have.
It's about breaking out of our echo chambers.
Exactly. Another point Kahneman emphasizes is to focus on the process, not just the outcome.
So it's not all about reaching that end goal.
Right. He reminds us that our memories are often shaped by the peak moment and the ending.
Even if those moments aren't representative of the whole experience.
It's about savoring the journey, not just chasing the destination.
I love that. It makes me think about planning a vacation, for example. Instead of fixating on that one perfect week,
Yeah.
maybe it's about spreading those moments of joy throughout the year.
Creating more opportunities for relaxation, for
It's
connection.
a shift in perspective, isn't it? From intensity to duration.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about loss aversion.
Oh, yeah, that fear of losing what we have.
It's so powerful. It can make us overly cautious even when taking a risk might lead to something better.
We'd rather hold on to what we have, even if it means missing out on potential gains.
It's a tough one to overcome.
So how do we do it? How do we become more comfortable with risk?
One way is to reframe our thinking. Instead of focusing on what we might lose,
Okay.
focus on what we might gain.
Flipping the script.
Exactly. And trying to detach emotionally from the situation, making decisions based on logic, not just gut feelings.
Taking a step back.
Yes. And finally, we have to be mindful of how things are framed.
Oh, right, framing. It's incredible how much it can influence us.
Kahneman's work shows how even small changes in wording or presentation can shift our preferences.
It's like those marketing tricks, making the same product seem more appealing.
Exactly. Being aware of framing effects helps us become more critical thinkers.
More conscious consumers, not just of products, but of information and ideas.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from thinking fast and slow,
Being more aware,
more deliberate.
more conscious.
It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress. Our minds are complex, they're not perfect.
But understanding them gives us the power to make better choices.
And to be more compassionate, not just to others, but to ourselves.
I love that. It's about embracing our imperfections while still striving to learn and grow.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, this has been an incredible journey exploring thinking fast and slow. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's been a pleasure. Such a fascinating book.
If you're looking for more resources to expand your knowledge, I highly recommend checking out lingopediamagazine.com.
They have some great courses and ebooks on a wide range of topics.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share this episode with your friends, and give us a like if you enjoyed our deep dive. We'll be back with more insightful conversations soon.